to me to have somebody coming back from Nashville for us that we all know doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'm gonna give him one anyway. Can you imagine getting appointed to the governor's team as a commissioner of workforce and development, and having COVID hit, and all of a sudden you've got mega thousands of people that don't have jobs anymore, and have to ramp up overnight to handle that? And then having a plan on the table that you were going to plan on increasing job skills and all across the state in the midst of all that. Well, there's two success stories, and our own Jeff McCord has his own success stories here in Kingsport. Governor Lee appointed Dr. Jeff McCord Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce in January of 2019. Since that time, under McCord's leadership, Tennessee developed its first multi-agency comprehensive workforce development strategy, grew apprenticeships to the highest level in over a decade, surpassed the national average for labor participation for the first time in 2 decades, implemented multiple successful cross-agency workforce development initiatives, and now is engaged in the COVID-19 pandemic unemployment response and re-employment efforts. Before joining the department, Commissioner McCord spent several years in higher education, primarily focusing on workforce development, including leading the Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing, a nationally recognized technical training facility, leading the development of Tennessee's first registered apprenticeship program through a post-secondary institution, and serving as the lead administrator for the award-winning Kingsport Academic Village. Prior to his work in higher education, McCord spent over 20 years in business and industry, holding a variety of leadership positions. Poor fellow couldn't keep a job. Primarily in a Fortune 500 company. He has specific experience related to corporate learning and development, organizational effectiveness, process improvement, and information technology. Commissioner McCord is a writer, and Twilight Times book published his knowledge, Awkward Grace, in 2008. He's also written more than 500 columns for 2 Tennessee newspapers. McCord received his Bachelor of Science degree from Georgia Tech, went on to earn a Master's in Business Administration from Kennesaw State University, and his doctorate in Learning and Leadership from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. We all know CJ. He married well. They have 3 children, 2 boys and a daughter, all of them grown, and 4 grandchildren. Without further ado, thank you, Jeff, for coming to speak today.
Hey, thank you, everybody. It is really, how am I doing?
You'll have to hold it.
Feelings, how about that? It is really, really good to be home. The governor we were flying in that little plane on the way over here, and the governor looked at me and said, "You're just catching a ride, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I'm just catching a ride. We'll go wherever you want to go, but at the end of the day, I'm staying home for a little while." I thought that we would walk through some of the challenges that we're facing currently and some of the strategies we have to meet those challenges. And then open it up for questions. I do apologize for having to leave early, show up late and leave early. I was taught better than that. I was raised better than that. By not only people over on this table, but also people in the room. And it's always, I'm always just thankful when I get to come home and see the folks who I draw on their lessons every day, especially over this past year. So I've been trying to think of a story or a metaphor or an analogy for what happened in March, not just for the health side, but the economic disruption. And so I've had everything from an umbrella under an avalanche to many other metaphors for what happened, but I haven't been able to come up with one which is a little frustrating to me because I fancy myself at being good at that sort of thing. But I was listening to the radio the other day, and they were talking about Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And I had a friend who worked at Oak Ridge, who I would play cards with on Sundays. His name's Jack, and so Jack and I would play cards on Sundays. And the announcer talking about the stories was lamenting that there was no first-hand accounts of Oak Ridge. And I got to thinking about Jack and I playing cards, and he would mention it a couple of times. And you could see the weight of the thing on him when he did. But we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it, I didn't write it down, really for two reasons. One was we were there to play cards. And secondly, it's really hard to have any kind of context about what that was and what had happened during that time. Now, we're not trying to beat Hitler to the A-bomb, so I'm not comparing that relatively. I think what I will say is something, and here's that word again, unprecedented happened, and the best way I think to talk about it, at least to kind of foster an understanding, is just talk about some numbers real quick, if you'll allow me to. And even if you won't, I'm still going to do it. So I'm up here. I've got the microphone. Feel a little confident now. So along with the pandemic, there was a major disruption to the economy. So in a 4-week period, unemployment claims grew 2,500%. So that looks like going from 15,000 a week to over 400,000 a week in 4 weeks. Over 1 million people, that's a third of our workforce, filed for unemployment insurance. Typically, in a year, we would have distributed $200 million of unemployment benefits. This year was over $6 billion. From 200 million to 6 billion in 10 months. Just in case we didn't have anything to do, the federal government required us to build 5 new unemployment insurance systems during that whole time. Our department of 1,200 people, we expanded by another 600 people in less than 10 months and trained them on this nuanced and complicated thing called unemployment insurance. And over the last 10 months, the unemployment insurance division has worked over 22 years of overtime. That is what we've up against. And is there any member of the press here?
There's a wife of a member of the press.
So no press. So let me say this: we were going around the we were going around the cabinet meeting one time, and we were to say what we learned about what we're going through as a state, and there was some really good words being said about resilience and about making sure that you're doing self-care. And when it got to me, they asked me what I learned, and I said, I've learned a hell of a lot about unemployment insurance. But there's other things too. So that's where we've been, what we've been up against. And I get my Irish up because our folks, in the midst of that, get criticized and blamed and all sorts of things. And so you get to the point where you know what you're doing is good and right, and so you do good and right, and you also get to the point where you're on your knees quite a bit as well, to be honest with you. Tennessee, in terms of unemployment insurance, has outperformed any state in the union. I can say that as much as the first time we had the systems going first, we have fewer appeals, we have all the process, but it's still a difficult proposition when a third of your workforce goes out of work, and you need to ramp up. We enter this year with some of those same challenges. We had kind of wrestled it to the ground a little bit before the federal government helped us again, and so near the end of the year, we got some more legislation passed. At the time, Tennessee had a 5.2% unemployment rate, but we needed some more unemployment help. And so I spent New Year's with my folks in the department, just working through trying to implement three more new systems that we needed to put in. In my time with Eastman, like you say, I couldn't keep a job. I prefer to call it diversity of experience. But one of my roles was as a project manager, IT project manager for the international portfolio of IT projects. We would not have attempted to put 5 new systems in 10 months that faced our customer. We just wouldn't have done that. And so, of course, during that period, it's challenging, hard, but I will say in the department, there is no woe is me. I mean, we have a job to do, and the job that we have to do is filled with purpose to help transition people back to work. And so very early on, Tennessee began to say, okay, we have to, our priority certainly is, or I'm gonna put this down because it's bothering me, is certainly on benefits distribution. But what happens next? There is no silver bullet here except for a job. And a job, somebody is a silver bullet. When we think of a job, it's just not economic prosperity, but your health outcomes increase, your confidence in who you are, your self-assurance increase. So work, we are designed to work. And so there's a lot of social outcomes that happen as well. And so we began to focus not just on benefits distribution, but on what happens after, how do we recover from where we've been and get to a better place. So I'd like to talk about 4 areas that I think you should take pride in your state, that have happened, that are unique during even this time of disruption. And a lot of them, you should feel really good because they came from this community and we just took it to Nashville. So the first one I'll talk about is labor participation rate. Okay, so labor participation rate is how many people are engaged in the workforce. So over 16, non-incarcerated people, that's about 5.5 million people in Tennessee. So what percentage of those folks are either working or employed and are actively seeking work, not outside the workforce system? And when you're recruiting or trying to develop economic opportunities like the one at Eastman, the first place now people goes to workforce. And the second question is, what's your labor participation rate? How engaged is your populace in wanting to work? So we entered the pandemic with a 24-year history of never surpassing the national average in labor participation rate until now. And part of the opportunity in the calamity is people on unemployment, we know where they are, and we can bring the services to those folks and engage them and get them to work. And so for the first time in over 2 decades, Tennessee has a higher labor participation rate than the rest of the nation. Thank you. Give me an amen. Yes, ma'am. Okay. And the second thing that's different than when we went in is part of what needs to happen. We have a lot of automation and artificial intelligence and that sort of thing, and we have people need